Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a quick lecture about the structure of cell membranes. I'm going to be talking about what cell membranes are composed of and go into more detail about phospholipids and how they sort of arrange themselves into a cell membrane that you're typically used to seeing in basic biology. So in the human body, we have these things called membranes. Membranes are just boundaries, basically. So membranes are just boundaries. And they separate things into an internal environment internal environment and an external environment. And in the human body, we have membranes that are composed of three common components. So membranes are composed of three basic components. We have lipids, and embedded in those lipids are proteins, these proteins can perform important functions, and a basic function they can do is transporting molecules. And then embedded in between those, we can also find carbohydrates. And these carbohydrates can be found usually attached to lipids or proteins. And the carbohydrates that are attached to lipids are called glycolipids. So glycolipids are just carbohydrates attached to lipids. And then we also have glycoproteins. And these are carbohydrates attached to proteins. Now in this video, I'm going to focus primarily on lipids. In the human body, we'll typically find that cell membranes are composed of phospholipids. Phospholipids are just molecules that contain a phosphate group and two fatty acids. So phospholipids have a glycerol backbone and this glycerol backbone is attached to a phosphate group as well as two fatty acids. So we might see something like this. As a phospholipid. So we have a phosphate group here, and we have two fatty acids attached there. Now, an important thing to note is that this phosphate group, so I'll label that as the phosphate group, the phosphate group is hydrophilic. Hydrophilic. And this is because that group is polar. So it can form bonds, hydrogen bonds, with water, so with H2O. And hydrophilic just means water loving. The fatty acid tails, on the other hand, I'll label them here. The fatty acids are hydrophobic. So this means water fearing. And the reason they're hydrophobic is that they're nonpolar. So they cannot form hydrogen bonds with water. Because a phospholipid has both hydrophilic and hydrophobic regions, we can also call phospholipids amphipathic. And the term amphipathic just means that the molecule has both hydrophobic and hydrophilic regions. So an amphipathic molecule just has hydrophilic and hydrophobic regions. Now, in an aqueous environment, such as one you might see in the human body, these amphipathic molecules, or these phospholipids, will spontaneously rearrange themselves. They'll rearrange themselves in a way that the phosphate groups will interact with water, and the nonpolar fatty acids will not be able to interact with water. So the arrangement of these phospholipids in the body happens spontaneously, where we have the phosphate groups out here, and the fatty acid tails inside here. And we'll also have that same arrangement here. Some of those weren't drawn that well, but just so you can get an idea, we have this arrangement of these phospholipids spontaneously happening in the human body, where these polar groups are arranged on the outside, interacting with water, and we have these fatty acid tails, these non-polar groups arranged on the inside, not interacting with water. Now, the shape of the membrane is determined by the bulkiness of the head group relative to the hydrophobic tails. So the structure of the membrane can be different depending on how big this phosphate group is compared to the size of the hydrophobic fatty acid tails. So we can have different structures for the cell membrane. We can have the cell membrane arranging itself into a micelle shape. And in these micelle structures, we'll have one really bulky phosphate group attached to only one single fatty acid tail. And because of the shape of this lipid, it will sort of arrange itself into almost a spherical structure. So I'll try to draw it out here. As I don't know if that was really a good drawing, but we'll have it arranged into sort of a spherical shape with the tails pointing inwards. And this is called a micelle membrane. We also have, I guess, a common just bi layer, which you're probably already familiar with, but the phosphate group will be relatively the same size as these two fatty acid tails. So what we have in a lipid bilayer structure is just a more rectangular arrangement. Like this. So this is a lipid bilayer structure. Another common structure you might encounter is a liposome type bilayer. So these liposomes will also contain one phosphate group and two fatty acid tails. But the structure of the membrane is sort of more spherical. So it might look something like this, where we have the phosphate groups out here and a hollow part in here, also with phosphate groups out here too. And then the fatty acid tails just arranging into the center. So in a liposome structure, it's kind of like a lipid bilayer structure, except there's a hollow region in here, while in the micelle structure, there isn't that. So that's it for my lecture today on the structure of cell membranes, their components, the structure of phospholipids and how they spontaneously arrange themselves into different cell membrane structures, including micelle, bilayer, or liposomes. But thank you for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to comment, like, and subscribe. Also, be sure to keep in touch on my Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube. I'll also have linked in the description box a Quizlet set where you can test yourself on this knowledge and keep on practicing your biology. But that's it for today. Hope to see you next time in another video. But that's it for now, and thank you for watching.